And they are off. I was gonna say, I think a lot of people would love to see an Alireza versus Magnus final. Game aborted. I guess they played with the wrong color. We shall see what happens. But yeah, I think a lot of players would love to see a rematch of Magnus versus Alireza from the Banter Blitz final, the Banter Blitz Cup on Chess 24, where Alireza got the better of Magnus. And so will we see a rematch? We're about to find out. They are off. Alireza has the white pieces in the first game.
And Naroditsky going for the Shigorin, a combative opening straight off the bat, so he's showing that even with the black pieces, he's going to take the game to Alireza. Black has actually forced white to maneuver a lot with his knight, and you have to say white's position is quite nice, or black's position is quite nice, but knight f4 is a nice touch, getting rid of pieces. You take my queen, I take your queen. In the end, both sides have a minor piece. f5 is dangerous against possible bishop c4 ideas. Knight now going to b6, preventing this, but one of the things I suddenly like Alireza's position a lot more. He's got the bishop pair, he's got this center, and his development problems have been solved. I think it's advantage on position, advantage Alireza right now. The pawn on c4 was hanging, but this position is very, very awkward. If you just drop the bishop back to c1, the idea is the knight can move forward to d3. Otherwise, you would lose the pawn. Knight d3 though, chasing that pawn. And I like Alireza's position. What are you going to do about this pawn? I don't see a way to defend it. You can try to mix things up. He goes for b5. He just accepts the fact that the pawn cannot be saved. The one thing that Alireza now will probably proceed to do is try to advance the pawns on the light squares. This is very typical because this is the only way that white can use his majority here, which is in the center. Knight e5, you cannot take the knight because the rook was hanging. Knight goes back to c4. And now we see the push of the pawn, rook check, disimproving the king. The king stands better in the center. However, having to advance the pawn like this, having forced that, is a sort of positional strategic victory for black, because now it's very difficult to push these pawns because black owns the light squares. However, has this pawn dropped? I believe it has. And now that's actually 2 pawns, and suddenly Alireza is in control. That's a third pawn.
And the king is in a mating now.
Yes, and rook f4. Game over. It happened so fast, and that's Alireza. He just spots everything with such incredible speed, and he takes the first game.
Incredible. So 1-0 to Alireza. Can Naroditsky bounce back with the white pieces?
Well, it's a c3 Sicilian. At the highest levels of over-the-board classical chess, maybe it's a solid opening, but in bullet it's quite a combative opening. You get this isolated queen's pawn. Means that a lot of endgames are going to be worse for you, but middle games tend to favor you. So Naroditsky is definitely fighting here. He gets this square on d6, this beautiful square. The knight is supported, and black definitely doesn't want to give up his bishop. White would then have the bishop pair and a really strong pawn, but this knight is, sometimes some people call it an octopus. When that knight hits the 6th rank, it's a very annoying piece. Now bishop takes d5. The question is, that'll be black's best piece, and whoa, Naroditsky had pre-moved that exchange sacrifice, and I think Alireza, anticipating that, prepared this little kind of pre-move trick. Naroditsky is still in control, but I think Alireza is going to be able to move this position towards very, very drawn territory. Why I say that Naroditsky is in control, he is up a pawn, and he gets that rook on the 7th. That's a huge bit of sort of strategic success. Black now has to deal with this. He might go for some bishop f1 counterplay here on g2, but the black king is very, very unsafe, and bishop f1 with that rook here, you can always deal with that. So that's what we're seeing. We're going to see d7. How do you stop the pawn? You have to go rook here, but bishop f6 is going to support the pawn. That's a really nice trick. King g3, not interested in bishop. I want this pawn to cost you a full rook, and that's going to convert. I don't see any way to prevent this. Black is going for counterplay, but suddenly there's a queen on the board. White's king has more than enough squares.
And Alireza resigns.
Alireza resigns. It's 1-1, and we might be headed for another tense affair from start to finish. Third game. It's a King's Indian on the board.
Absolutely. And an attacking opening from white here. He's going for the throw, just pushing those pawns forward on the king side, h4, g4, and it's gonna be a very chances for both sides, but
this is a move that I like to see. If I'm black here, white has to give up this strong dark squared bishop. Usually you don't want to do that because then this piece becomes really, really strong. But the point was, Naroditsky had seen that king on e1, had seen this x-ray, and had seen all of this combination, and he's really doing this. He's really taking the game. White has to castle into this danger. C-file, the pawn falls. You cannot take the queen, king b1. Now you can take the queen. You could go queen b3. I really like this move. I like Naroditsky's position. So much pressure from all of his pieces. He goes rook here. Threat is queen takes a3. But for now, the bishop has to be defended. Bishop defended. Now queen takes a3 is a threat as far as I can tell. Will he grab the pawn? He does grab the pawn. And maybe knight b5 was a little trick. Maybe knight b5, but queen takes b2, queen takes, bishop takes. It might have been something like that Alireza thought there was a trick and then realized there wasn't. Something along those lines could have happened. Well, that's just guesswork, really. Now the question is, will Alireza take that pawn? He doesn't want to. He wants to keep lines a little bit closed. And rook c8, bringing more pieces to bear. This is a free attack. Black actually has a good material situation, and he breaks that down, and that was incredible. That was an amazing game from Naroditsky. 2-1 to Naroditsky.
Yeah. And a big win, because so far it is a win with the black pieces. I think all day long it hasn't mattered so much. We haven't seen a game, but here, okay, they exchanged blows with the white pieces, and to get a
Alireza, though, maybe has tricked Naroditsky a little bit, and now Alireza gets the kind of position that Naroditsky had in the last game. Although one difference is that white can castle and he'll be more or less safe. But what a position to get with the black pieces. All your pieces are very strong. Knight is coming to e4. And this might cost you some material. I think white is going to have to sacrifice the queen. That's exactly what he does. Knight f6 check is going to come in here. You can win this rook. Black re-sacrifices. And in the end, it's as simple as that, Fiona. We're into a rook and drawn, a boring game and drawn rook and bishop endgame. What can be said? But white has offered draws and those have been declined. So Alireza wants a win here, but black offered a draw then, and white declined it. So maybe the tables have turned, and it's white who feels he can press. And why not? White does have an extra pawn. He's putting everything on dark squares. Opposite color bishops are famous for being very, very drawish. However, white will try to use his extra pawn. Why not? The question is, though, be very careful, because white now offers a draw, says, look, we've got 27 seconds on the clock. I know it's a draw, and I respect that. Alireza, I respect your speed, respect your quality. I'm not going to try and push my luck here. So
a first draw in the second semi-final, and Naroditsky still with the 1 point lead, and we once again see Alireza throwing the pawns up.
Same trick was available there, but the pawn on g6 was hanging, so you needed to take care of that. Now black is trying to complete his development, but once again, white is castling into some sort of danger. But I like white's position a lot more than before. He keeps the c-file shut down, and we're even going to see maybe the knight e7 check looks quite strong to me. King f7, you can grab this pawn, but he goes a different direction. Knight f3, maybe he was worried about this pawn on f2 dropping. And there's even, if you can put the knight on g5, then there would even be mating threats. Black maneuvers with check, gaining time, putting the knight on a beautiful square, hitting the queen, and forcing that knight to drop. But we do see that sequence that we were talking about, perhaps rook takes h7. The point is, if you take that knight, the bishop is hanging. This exchange happens, the knight returns to d5. I like very much Alireza's position, because black's king is going to be in trouble. c4, c5 is a really good move, trying to bring that bishop in. Knight f4, and now that's crushing, because bishop takes his force, queen takes, and now the king is so bare. Knight takes g6 would hit the rook and also create a threat of mate. He goes a different direction. Queen e7 takes, and I think he will just play the practical approach, and he will convert this endgame. We see a lot of pawns here, and this extra material is just not enough. He might even exchange here and go into a winning rook takes bishop, winning king and pawn endgame. That's what he does. He takes the practical approach. You cannot do much with your majority while these three pawns are going to completely overrun the black king. We're going to see black desperately trying to make something. Of course, there are some ideas with b4 and c3, but it's a net 2-pawn majority, which in endgames means it's very, very difficult to make use of it. b4, the idea is to take white. Oh, white does not take. I'm a little bit surprised, but what do I know? I think now b3 ideas maybe were...
What's going on here? And Alireza's time. Under 3 seconds.
Whoa! And he's gonna queen. Naroditsky wins that!
Unbelievable. What a huge win for now. What even happened there?
I thought it was just an easy win. That's what I thought it was an easy win. I think Alireza did too, because he was crushing it. He exchanged rook for bishop, and Naroditsky so tricky, so incredibly tricky, and he somehow manages to promote, even though he had less pawns. This is very, very
suddenly
crazy.
It's a 2-point lead for Naroditsky. 3.5, 1.5. And the white pieces.
Wow, Alireza is up against it. Yes, the white pieces. So Alireza will need to make something happen here. But I love Naroditsky's position. This knight on e5 is a monster, well supported. Queen coming to e2. Probably you're going to move that rook to d1. And white is trying to fight against that, kicking the knight back. Or black, rather, is trying to fight against that. He kicks the knight back successfully. Bishop f6. I'm starting to like Alireza's position a little bit more, but wait a second. Queen takes b5. The knight on c5 is undefended. You cannot move it because the bishop is also hanging. So what do? Do you go passive with a move like queen c8? Well, maybe b4 or bishop f2 will undermine this. Knight d6 is a threat. Bishop a6 was that missed, however. Bishop a6 may have been missed. I know the knight on c4 does manage to defend here.
Alireza is down on the clock again.
Down a huge amount on the clock. Down a huge amount. He goes h5. A little bit of an unusual move. Knight b7. Nice resource. Otherwise, you would have lost material because your rook was also hit. We're going to see that exchange happening here. Knight takes f5. Maybe on the cards because if you take, the knight is falling. Naroditsky plays it. Queen e5. Maybe we're going to see knight to d4 or some kind of square like this. That's what we see. And black is going to go for some kind of counterplay. Maybe he'll take here and try to generate some counterplay. Queen d3, forcing the queens off the board. There were too many threats here. And we're seeing a king and pawn endgame where, once again, Naroditsky is in great shape. He's up a pawn. And on top of that, he's up so much time on the clock. And Alireza needs nothing short of a miracle. He's won a second pawn. He's objectively winning. Can Alireza somehow outpace Naroditsky? Naroditsky is one of the fastest players on the planet. I don't think he's going to get there. 7 seconds against 4. And this is going to cost him a rook. It's a queen on the board. It costs him the rook. Nothing to do. Alireza moving his king. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Alireza gives up.
And Alireza, we saw a smile there on his face. But more a smile of, like, what's going on here, as Daniel Naroditsky takes a 1.5 lead, huge lead in this situation. Daniel Naroditsky is 2 points away from qualifying to the final where Magnus Carlsen awaits. I need some water too, this is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Naroditsky's play has just been phenomenal so far, and Alireza really needs to make something with the white pieces here in this game. He's probably going to break in the center, try to use that bishop pair. I like his position for now. Black doesn't have any counter breaks himself. He puts the rook on d1. Black sidesteps these x-rays. The pawn on c7 is a little bit shaky. Black goes c6, kicking out that strong knight, but now the break d5 is very good because when you take, this pawn is now weak. All of the black pawns are quite weak, and it has to be said, in a must-win situation, Alireza has got the kind of position that he wants. Here he keeps the pressure alive. Bishop a3, c4. You're probably going to see one of these breaks, b5 or c5. Black trying to find some counterplay. Will we see f5 and trying to get that rook playing against this knight? Beautiful idea from Naroditsky, costing the bishop here, giving up a pawn. But now this bishop becomes really a monster because it doesn't have a dark scored counterpart.
And look at the clock situation again. Daniel is up 10 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, the question is, maybe could there be some kind of slight. Oh, knight e3, huge move. You couldn't take it because queen takes g3, and Daniel has just turned the bad position, slightly bad position, into a winning position here. A total exchange, and that's crushing because bishop f4. That's the reason you couldn't take that. You're up in exchange. The king steps out of all the nasty checks. Bishop e4, trying to grab this pawn so you can make something of these pawns. But once the pawn on b4 falls, it's very difficult. f6 is a threat. Bishop d4 stopping that. That is the last great hope for white. The time situation. Alireza needs to make something happen here. He's losing this knight. He goes for bishop c4, goes for some trickery, loses everything, resigns. 5.5, 1.5. What a scoreline.
And Alireza, once again, you didn't see, but he sort of leaned back and laughed almost in disbelief, while Dania has been very focused, very calm and focused. I mean, he is putting on such a beastly performance. 5.5 versus 1.5. He's just 1 point away from making it to the final.
Yeah, and you see the confidence in his face. You see, I mean, he's been playing great chess. Now he can offer. He's offering Alireza the option. Let's draw. Knight h5, queen f3. They did that once. There's a rule in chess, threefold repetition. Certainly, Alireza doesn't want that, but f5, be careful, because the queen cannot stay on the g-file, and Alireza has snapped up a piece here and goes bishop g5 check. Really nice. If you took that immediately, there was this drop.
We saw a reaction from Daniel there, sort of lifting his eyes to the sky. And Alireza, I mean, I think it is already pretty much must-win territory here for Alireza. He really needs to get his momentum back and stack up, a few wins if he wants to stand a chance to come back.
For sure, but once again, Daniel making it so tricky and a 10-second edge on the clock. It's possible that Alireza is not going to convert even though he is up a full piece here. And this would be, knight d6, look at that trickery. You're ignoring this rook. Daniel is such a great offensive player. We see queen takes c2 is in the cards, but this bishop has dropped. And look at Alireza. And look at Daniel. Daniel knows how huge that game was. Alireza just sort of laughing a little bit, and I mean,
Daniel is so pumped. And we see Alireza. Alireza is out. And I'm gonna give Daniel some privacy as well. But this is what we are going to get in the final. Daniel Naroditsky against Magnus Carlsen.